Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Caitlin, otherwise known as Compatibility Coach, and I am a love and life coach who helps people heal whatever needs to be healed within themselves, as well as manifest and find that love that they are after. So I work with amazing people around the world to do this. Now, today on this video, we are going to be talking, sorry, my dog is, as you know, this is Frank. He is going to whine unless I let him up with me. We are going to be talking about something that's super close to my heart and that comes up constantly, and this is people pleasing. So in this video, we're going to be discussing what are the signs of people pleasing, why we tend to people please, and then more importantly, what can we do to get ourselves out of this habit or out of this coping strategy. Now, this actually came from a question from a lovely lady all the way in Mexico, hello, which was, let me get it up, what can I do to slow down and feel calm when on a date instead of reacting like a people pleaser? So in other words, what can you do to stay grounded and to come from a place of knowing who you are and strength when interacting with people, rather than employing those sometimes anxious I should say, coping strategies where we want them to choose us, so we will go above and beyond to do absolutely anything. And it means, how do we keep the energy on us rather than externalizing and focusing it all on them? And I think it's a really, really important question. So when we talk about people pleasing, especially in relation to dating, what do we mean? Well, we mean things such as feeling the need to be perfect all the time and not being able to be seen unless you are so, and that could manifest in feeling like you've got to achieve all the time, or it could manifest in feeling like you've got to look perfect, whatever that might be, or it could look like avoiding conflict, never wanting to speak up or get into any discussion where you would have to perhaps go against what somebody says, and similarly to that, saying you agree with opinions when you don't, never offering your own opinion when asked what you want or what you think because you're scared it's going to push them away, when you don't have the ability to say no. And you know, this is something kind of within dating a lot, but actually in the workplace this happens with friends, families, constantly. You might put other people's needs before yours. You might squash kind of any emotions you're feeling or any needs you do have because you're worried that it might overwhelm others. What else? These are quite interesting as well. Having a low opinion of yourself, that can be a real sign there is some people-pleasing tendencies going on, because you will want to elevate yourself and try and make people like you, basically, by doing everything and being everything and kind of moulding yourself sometimes to what they want. And another sign is only really feeling validated and good enough when it's by somebody else. So that self-worth doesn't come from within, it comes from others. And you know, perhaps a kind of overarching sign of this is, you know, you will say yes to so many things, but that resentment will really build. And sometimes you might blow up or feel like you're doing too much, or, you know, that kind of anger comes in because you've been pushed too far, but actually it's because there's been a lack of boundaries in the first place. So let's talk about why. And as I said, ultimately people pleasing is a coping strategy where sometimes, to be honest, comes from that fear of abandonment or fear of rejection, where you will say whatever in order to try and make that person like you, because if they like you, you will feel loved, you'll feel secure, they'll stay, they'll choose you, all of those things. But it really does also become exhausting, because bit by bit you tend to lose yourself, and as I said, those boundaries get broken, or there might be no boundaries at all, you know, if we're looking at enmeshment and things like that, and it can create quite one-sided relationships. So let's look at what you can do in order to break this cycle. So as I mentioned, the kind of desire to people please can either come from that kind of fear that we are not enough as we are, which might be linked to, potential childhood wounds, or it's a limiting belief that is built up over and over and over again. Whatever the reason, the coping strategy that you are now employing perhaps has turned into a habit. So even if you've been working on those areas of self-belief and security and self-worth, sometimes even just breaking the habit can be quite hard because it feels like an innate response. You've spent years conditioning yourself to jump in and give everything they want, so it can be quite tough to do so. So I've got 5 things you can start doing, and number 1 actually is a technique that you can use in that moment. So remember, the original question was, in that moment, how does she slow down rather than react and people please when she's talking to a guy? Now, when you feel yourself going into that people pleasing mode, or if you know in the past that there's been a situation or a trigger where you do this, in that moment you can employ some really simple grounding techniques, which is designed to bring you back to yourself. So your energy again is pulled inwards, it's focused on you rather than expanded to somebody else, and just grounds you in the present rather than jumping ahead. And this can be anything, guys. This can be as simple as, in that moment, just noticing for a second how your breath goes in and out. It could be popping your thumb and your finger together by your side. Nobody's going to notice that. It could be feeling for a moment your feet on the floor or your bum on the chair, wherever you're sitting. It could be glancing round and finding 5 objects to focus on. So these are really, really quick, simple techniques. Whatever works for you in whatever space, don't care what it is, that's just one option to try in the moment. The other thing I would start doing is around creating awareness for what your triggers are and what your tendencies are and what your reactions to this are, because we always want to be responding rather than reacting based on something from the past or something we're worried about in the future. And again, if that people pleasing technique has come from a wound or a horrible belief about yourself or people or love or whatever it is, then that's coming from the past, isn't it? So let's actually start to get really clear on, when do you people please the most? What happens? What the situations are? What's going on in your body? What thoughts are going through your head? What emotions are you feeling? And what you do and how you feel about it after. So you can perhaps pick a couple of examples that will have come up recently, and then you can spend some time reframing this. So looking at that situation, if we take an example from, let's go outside dating, let's talk about work, right? Let's say your boss comes up to you and says, please can you do this? I need it by the end of the day. And you automatically go to say, yeah, okay, of course, no problem, knowing that you've got loads of work to do. So we can then look at that situation and actually think about, okay, what did we think our boss was thinking about us at that moment? What did we think our boss would think if we said no? What were our thoughts going through our mind at the moment? What was our body doing? Did we go tight? Did we get anxious? What was our emotional playing field? Was there a sudden jump? Did we feel a bit scared to say no, so we did it? Or did we just really want to impress and got excited? What was happening? And then the reframe comes in. Okay, so if you assume your boss would think you were lazy if you said no, what is another way that he could have seen it? What is another way that you could have expressed yourself? What is another way you could have felt? What is another thing you could have done instead? So we want to be using specific situations to reframe. So then when it comes up again, you will have a baseline of reference for how you could respond instead and for what potential other situations are. Number 3, I absolutely love, because this is a everyday activity you can do, and it really lends itself to getting to know you. But start making little decisions in everyday life about what you want and what your opinion is, and actually what's going to benefit you. So this can be anything from, if somebody says, what takeaway do you want tonight? Rather than saying, I don't mind, whatever you want, make a decision. Somebody says, what do you want to drink? Rather than saying, oh, what are you having? Make a decision. I was going through this with a friend the other day, and she came over, and there was no intention from me behind this, but I said, oh, what flavour crisps do you want? And she went, oh, I don't mind. And then she went, can I have the cheese and onion ones, please? I said, yes, of course. She's like, I've been practicing. I was like, amazing. So find everyday examples like that, where you start to make little decisions, start to say no to things you don't want to go to, rather than automatically saying yes. And practice on friends, families, colleagues, you know, wherever and whenever you can, so it becomes a lot easier when it actually comes to dating. So the fourth one is start to set boundaries, and again, we can do this outside of dating if we really struggle to set them within. So do you know what? I say practice setting boundaries and changing your mind if you want to. Outside of work, outside of dating. I really can't speak today. Anyway, so what I mean by this is, again, when we think about people pleasing and that automatic reaction to step in and be like, have everything, let me do everything, and then we get angry and annoyed, it's because we have broken what we feel is either an emotional or physical boundary, but that we didn't set in the first place. So we need to start setting boundaries, and this really leads on from that, you know, expressing your opinion, saying no, that sort of thing. But for example, if we take work again, your boss comes up to you and says, can you do this by the end of the day? And you go and you say, oh yeah, of course I can, that's absolutely fine. Later on, you actually give yourself permission to change your mind. You can go back to them and say, I've looked at my schedule, I'm so sorry, I can't do it by this time. If it's urgent, then I would need to reevaluate these things that I'm working on. Could you give them to somebody else? Blah, blah, blah. So again, you give yourself permission to change your mind. And even if you've said yes to something in that kind of immediate reaction, you can then say no. Or if you were, again, setting a boundary with your boss, you can say, I'm so sorry, that's not something that I have the capability to do today, because based on last week, I'm working on da-da-da. And final one, as always, please focus on rebuilding that self-worth and that self-esteem. Again, the things we've talked about will really help you do that, but they'll also help that immediate response. So it becomes more of a response rather than a reaction, and it will help you break the habits. But we need to also look at where this coping mechanism is coming from, which sometimes can be not feeling good enough as you are, not feeling worthy, not feeling confident. So we want to really start flexing that muscle and start rebuilding that worth. And you know, there are so many ways to do this, but a really nice way actually is explore what makes you the amazing person you are, what your values are, what you love doing, and then start actively moving towards that. So start living a little bit more in line with your values, start treating yourself with kindness. You know, even if you have a bath every evening, before you get in the bath, think to yourself, I'm doing this because I like myself. You know, there are so many micro ways we can build that every single day. And I have done previous videos on this, so I'm not going to go too much into detail here. But as always, thank you so much for tuning in and watching my video. Please rate, subscribe, review, comment, and as my lovely friend from Mexico did, let me know if you do have any questions, because I can always create content around that.